Good evening, dear Representative Council. Here on the latest news from the office, I'll be doing it sitting down. So in the community, we have events, Crystal Sauna, Sparkling Sauna Day from AVA, and also the student hockey evenings, Kiekko Espoo, where Eero managed to drop the puck onto the ice. Museum 65 years, museum activities under student unions for 65 years, celebration today, and also corporate relations with Mantas in Kapening. And then we have tutor trainings in April, May. On the real estate side, the competitive tendering for property maintenance, clearing outdoor area maintenance during the spring. With Otakari, the project plan and cost calculation has been completed. The technical planning has been received, and the planning is progressing with architects. The Serviniemi renovation project is progressing, though slowly. The cost estimation is different. For different solutions is going. We have the facelift Otakari for 18 with the renovations. Competitive tendering ongoing. On services, we have Janina Wikman as a service advisor on March 1st, working until June 1st, until the end of May, and until the end of May part-time, and from June 1st to the end of December full-time. We have the administrative assistant Martti Ranta, started not only administration, but also the service team as a rental real estate assistant, works 2 to 3 days per week. This year we will not be opening the applications for summer apartments like before, and the opportunity will be to move in and on June 1st, in accordance with the new regs. The Tatami Hall, the multi-facility hall and association room will be not rented to outsider in the future, only for internal use, and the resident satisfaction survey has been sent on Friday. Then on communications, the electoral campaigning work and the communications are ongoing. Lots of training for Mantas hat ceremony. We'll take the questions at the end. Hallitusjäsenten esittelyt tällä hetkellä IG:ssä käynnissä, alkoi nyt tässä maanantaina ja jatkuu ensi viikon loppuun. Sitten valmistautu until Friday, then we have the communications for Vappu, preparation for that. We put all kinds of bulletins out. Laskiais, Shrove Tuesday, ongoings, and on other parts as well. On advocacy side, we have lots of electoral advocacy. Tomorrow on Wednesday, we'll have an event at the front of the Parliament Hall, and in the evening after 4 p.m. we'll have the parliamentary panel in Smökki, and on Thursday we'll have a croquet match with candidates in the Alvar Square. On educational policy, we've handed out comments on language regulations. The Helsinki Public Transport Services has asked for a statement regarding the student discounts, and the World Student Capital, we had the chairperson chosen, Ene. And in IT and administration, we have new staff members. Like I said, we have Martti, and Ronja started as the advocacy expert. Imran Shamsul started as a coordinator. We'll be doing this until the end of spring, and we'll be helping with international projects. Then the integration project should be by the end of April, should finish. Increases in salaries. We'll probably hearing more about that in the future. I'll therefore add to it that the new generally binding student unions collective work agreement is in force now that the negotiations have been concluded. It's about 4.5% increases. We had originally anticipated about 3%. This will be exceeding the budget somewhat, and we will be bringing it to separate discussions when we've had the local discussions. So for your information, and we'll be telling more to you when these figures are ready. On the board, we have representing AYYE Shrove Tuesday, events welcoming Raide Jokeri Association, Student Union's annual celebrations. We had an honorary delegation meeting on the 2nd of March. Then we met with the Aalto University Foundation Board HR Committee on the 14th of March. We had a vacation last week, and like I said, this week we had the board introductions on Instagram. Past topics on the board's agenda: we have nominations for the Technology Foundation, operational grants, and several other items that can be read from the list on the board because the speaker is speaking very quickly. The text is very small. And preliminary discussion on the stipend scorings. Thank you. If you have any questions, you may ask the questions now. I have a few questions. What is AYUFB, the Aalto University Foundation Board? What is, when we are missing some things in Finnish? Can we get these slides in Finnish in the future? Wonderful, thank you. What has been discussed about the language policy? In Aalto, we are renewing the language policies because currently they are not good or are not actually not being implemented fully. So we are trying to implement the language policies. We have a lot of this general discussion on Finnish and Swedish languages, both in bachelor's and other stage. We had the first draft presented in the steering group, and then we have a new draft. What is AYYE stating? AYYE has not done any discussions. We want to retain the opportunity, or want to ensure that people can study in the national language. So AYYE is not stating for Finnish. AYYE states that the students retain the right to study in Finnish and need to retain the right. And then there was a question which the interpreter did not hear, but the board should maybe comment on it. Nothing new. It's about whether or not it's about the HSL discounts. Is it possible to get them onto a physical card because the mobile application has problems? Any other questions? Blinik.
In getting AYYE apartments.
regarding this, if we enable moving in, do we have enough spots for bachelor students? When we have the new master students that can take these slots directly. We aim to give out apartments equally. If it seems like we are handing them out only to master students, we will intercede. We have not done this before, so we don't have a clear-cut kind of a direct list of numbers or stuff that will happen. We don't know what it. We hope that everybody will get an apartment, and also bachelor's students. Thank you. So closing discussions, no other questions. The representative council place on record the latest news from the office. Closing item 7, moving on to item 8, which is the preliminary debate on the establishment of apologies, the interpreter has the wrong document in front of them. I will. The agenda is for the wrong meeting. In the future, the board will be deciding on changes to the composition of tenants. The board also handled this on their morning school meeting on the 28th of February. We have some individuals who are presenting themselves today. We'll take the questions at the end of the presentation. Hello everyone. We'll talk about the tenant choices. Turned to last year that we condensed the regulations into one compact package. It's about 10 plus pages still. And we modified it to be more in line with the legislation, especially with tenant democracy. And the tenant choices will be returned from the real estate steering group to preparation in the fall, so we can do it within the allocated time. So we had discussions about the tenant choices today with the tenant representatives in the morning school meeting in the 28th of February. Lots of changes compared to the earlier. We have the transition period until the end of 23, but the aim is to get the approvals earlier. On to the details. And on the tenant choices, some background here is that we did this some on the last fall, but to reiterate, the background is the ARA criterion. We have had to make our regulations more in accordance with the criterion. We have a slide here regarding the issue. Our earlier choices is quite old. It's from TKY's days, and we mainly had shared apartments. and it was pretty much simple that we only did the checkup for shared apartment. But since our flats are now very different, we should expand our probabilities. We should also get rid of queuing, or the principle of queuing. ARA has stated that no queuing system. So we cannot have a queuing system. So we must give it up and take into account the need for apartment. We need to increase flexibility, but also from ARA. We also have the legislation change, the interest support legislation, the act on interest support, and the tenant choices are public administrative tasks, so there's an even larger choice with staff members. They will have judicial responsibility for this, which also means that we need to make the tenant choices in which we can move so that we're not making decisions where individuals can be prosecuted for. We make in simplified terms, we must divide the housing based on need, the aim of which will not be like the old appendix was the scoring, that we will take every single situation into account in scoring, because there's also like force majeure situations, so no pallet can be made. So this always needs to be handled on a case-by-case basis. We had this and a pretty different, but the contents was pretty much the same. We had this model, we had different kinds of points, but we deemed that this is quite complicated or complex. Lots of different points, or 0.3 points or 7 scores points, so it would have been very complicated. So if we start to change one thing, we need to change the entire scoring. All in all, we aim to create a new model that we will internally call as a categorical model. The essence being that we will look at a category based on the requirement an individual has, priority being with people with no apartments and people coming from elsewhere. Based on this, we'll have a scoring that's based on income, and you will also receive scorings on other parts. And for example, if you have children, and the time is that how long has the application been in force, and for fresh people and exchange student we'll have a lottery instead of when you've sent your application in. And then going to the categories based on a need for an apartment, we have these 5 categories: having no apartment, very, very urgent, and others. Category 1 being homeless, which we go with the official criterion, and if the situation is very akin to these, it's very strict criterion to this. And if it's we have 5,000 homeless, and of them are our members. We're talking about a very, very small category. Category 2, very urgent, is very much in accordance with what we actually have. So we have people who live outside the metropolitan area, or they have a rental agreement ending in 3 months and they have not discharged it themselves, or living in a facility that's not fit to be an apartment. This will also apply for the first offered apartment, after which we drop to category 4. If you are applying alone, you're in category 2 in 2-room apartments, they'll be taken into account in category 4. We will take each individual into account when applying and they are urgent enough that it won't be focused on just the one individual who done the application. And the last point we will be returning we'll be looking at people who should apply for all types of apartments diversely so they can be included in this category. Next being pretty much the same, but if you have a very small apartment or if you have too high rent, I think for one person is 900 euros about. Or if you are living in your parents' house or subletting from your parents. You may read it from the list, all of the individual points. This also includes individuals who are changing a flat for a reason or need to change a flat for AYYE, and people who have lived here over 2 years. Not so strict criteria, which enables people from move from one apartment to the next one within the sphere of renting from us. Then we have basically category 4, which is general category. You have right of residence, degree student if you don't fill the other criterion, and then number 5, the rest, which is post-grad students, people with no right of residence, and grad students, degree students, where they are ending their right of residence within 6 months. So they will be the last category. In addition, we have 2 technical categories. Not everything goes to the other baselines. So if we have situations where you are presenting a friend into a shared apartment, they need to be current tenants or friend sharings or moving away for renovations. So these are kind of specific exceptions to the
olemaan
rule.
myös kategoria 6, johon käytännössä menisi, että jos meidän pitäisi tarjota henkilöä ei-jäsenelle, niin sitten
And then we
menisivät
have
siihen.
category 6, non-members.
Ja ihan Emil huomasi, että en tiedä olitko ottamassa kuvaa, mutta nämä ovat ihan myös lähetetty edustajistolle tiedoksi, eli löytyvät sitten sieltä myös samat materiaalit.
So same material will be found there.
Niin. Sitten vähän asunnon vaihtamisesta.
Then on changing
Sanoin jo
apartments,
siitä vähän, eli kiireellisiin
also mentioned a
asuntoihin,
bit. We have
kiireellisiin
the
hakijoihin,
urgent
henkilöihin, jotka esimerkiksi asuu vanhempiensa
categories,
luona,
so people who are living
niin
with their
mahdollistetaan
parents,
nyt meillä vielä laajempaa asunnon
enabling
vaihtamista
a more broad
suurimmalla osalla
changing of apartments.
muista
other
opiskelija-asuntoyhteisöistä.
student housing
Jos
communities.
on painavasta syystä pitäisi vaihtaa asuntoaan,
If you
niin
need to
he
change your
pääsevät samaan
apartment,
kategoriaan, minkä lisäksi myös, jos on
you'll be
ei
included in the
tarvitse
same
olla niin
category.
tiukkoja kriteereitä, jos he
The
ovat
criterion
asuneet
wouldn't be
nykyisessä
so
asunnossaan
strict if you have lived
yli
in
2
your
vuotta,
apartment
minkä
over
lisäksi
2
vielä
years.
kolmantena pointtina
third,
niin 3 pistettä kaikille henkilöille, jotka
points
asuvat
for
tällä
all
hetkellä soluissa.
individuals
Tämän
who are living in
tavoitteena
shared
on juuri
apartments. The aim
mahdollistaa
of
se,
this is to
viime vuonna
enable,
tuli edusteistossa esiin
last year we had
se
the
asia,
discussion in
että
the
henkilöt,
RepCo
jotka
that
valitaan alussa soluihin,
individuals
että
who are
jäävätkö
chosen
hännäs jumiin
into shared
soluihin.
apartments, they're kind of
Siis
stuck
ei
in the
sinne
shared
pidemmäksi
apartments.
aikaa, niin tällä halutaan mahdollistaa se, että
So this is
henkilöillä
something we
on
want to
mahdollisuus
change.
sitten myöhemmässä vaiheessa opiskeluja vaihtaa sitten myös vaikkapa soluista yksiöön tai
That they change
jotain
from
muita
shared
tilanteita.
apartments to studios or something
Alhaalla
like
löytyy esimerkiksi syitä, että milloin
Down
voi
we
saada
have reasons
päästä sinne
for
kiireelliseen kategoriaan, jos on
how can you get into the
tuota,
urgent
niin kun-
category.
tarvitsee asunnon vaihtoa.
You need a change of apartment.
Ja jatketaan seuraavaan kohtaan, eli pisteytykseen. Siinä oli
to
käytännössä
next item.
kategoriat, eli
This is
niiden
scorings.
pohjalta ensin
Based on this,
päätetään, että miten
we'll be
hakijat menee
deciding
niihin, ja jos hakijat
how
ovat
we
samassa
place
kategoriassa,
the
niin silloin katsotaan pisteytystä.
applicants into these.
Ja pisteytys on vähän
Looking at,
tutumpi systeemi,
scoring.
eli siinä on
Scoring is a bit more common. We
vastaavanlaisia pisteitä, niin kuin
kind of
aikaisemminkin,
scorings that we
mutta
had
sen
earlier,
lisäksi
but,
niin tuloja ja varallisuuden määrää
we will
tai sen
be
prioriteettia
evaluating
ollaan kasvatettu merkittävästi
income
johtuen ihan siitä, että ARA
and
vaatii, että
wealth,
ne ovat
because ARA
suurimmassa roolissa
requires
asukasvalinnassa,
this.
minkä lisäksi
In
näissä
addition,
ollaan lisätty myös tuonne tuollaiset
we have
NS-erityistapaukset,
added these special cases.
muun muassa toteutetaan tarveharkintaa, jos on
So we
terveydellisiä
have
syitä ja vastaavia.
Specific exceptions can be made through this.
Niitä ei ole ideana käyttää joka ikisen.
The idea is not to use these in every system, so we are using this for only small minorities. And, or if we have individuals where this model list does not taking them into account. And we have other scorings, pretty much same as old ones. What has been changed is internal transfer points, scorings for people changing from shared apartments. It was possible that within the same house group you may choose and change an apartment pretty easily, which has ended up in situations where individuals have moved into a smaller studio, and then only they had to take a smaller studio just to be able to move into a larger studio later. It causes too much expenses, and that's not the point of the system. So the point would be individuals who are living in shared apartments and would want to change to another type of apartment. So, and also for your information, who came here earlier, we also have received info that there was the worry that friend exchanges or friend recommendations will be removed. They are not removed. They won't be in the appendix because they're not a part of the normal basic tenant choices, but they will not be disappearing. Then we have the income categories based on last year. If this would be in effect, this is kind of a more of a background document. It would be changed and updated, and it shows how much your income and wealth affects this situation. The biggest numbers being the highest numbers, 1,300 euros a month or 8,000 euros. If you surpass this, they will not actually take a stance if you're under the levels. Most of our applicants are falling into this category. They will not surpass the categories. Last being at the time, so how long will the application, or how long has the application been active? And it works a bit differently. Here being this is kind of the model I mentioned earlier, but you need to take into account the applied apartments and their diversity into account with the thresholds. So we are using these thresholds from here on out so that urgency is not the way to get into the best studios, the only way to get in that. So urgency will not be a way where you can kind of play the system. But I will be moving away from the metropolitan area to my parents for a while, so I can actually apply for only the Jätkäsaari large studios and then get a spot. But in order for individuals to be considered urgent, they need to be applying for all types of apartments. In addition, in our processes, we'll be prioritizing shared apartments to new students, so filling them up firstly. And if we don't have shared apartments and we have urgent individuals, they can be offered studios. Of course, we have specifics that we can make exceptions to the rule. If we have an individual who needs an accessible apartment, that will be taken into account. Also, with the original numbers, these are all examples on our current housing stock, and we need to change these a bit and adjust these. So this is something that you can use to see kind of how much do you need to apply. Basically, you need to apply shared apartment, discounting gendered shared apartments, or if you are applying solo, not applying duplexes. Both in Otaniemi and Leppävaara, and most of the apartments. If you're an urgent applicant, it's a bit broader categories in requirements, but they are still there. The aim being that this is not a way to game the system. You are trying to get an urgency score for just a while and get into these kind of coveted places. So this is practically the choice we have. So also clarifying that what we will be discussing with you and what are we searching for. Primarily, we have the ARA criterion as a baseline. So for these large policies, we will not look at their requirement, then their monetary status. That's something we need to do based on ARA regulations. But we have the situation where we have, for example, what's offered to new students or fresh people. So in these situations, the representative council and the role is that if you see, especially with the scoring, if you see that there is an individual group that have not been taken into account, discuss that, we'll take them into account better. Also as a background, also in Takiva we discussed this. We also have this specific instructions for applicants will be created based on how does this tenant choices. So this is not an appendix. You don't need to look. But this is more like an internal regulation or internal guideline on how do we do choices. Also think that the legislation update has come and we have the judicial responsibility for prosecution. So let's do decisions that will not create a situation where we are not in a, by following our regulations, we'll be breaking the law. And last, before we can comment or get the comments, I think this is the last one. So my work contract is ending at the end of next month, so we'll be making the decision the next month's meeting. So after that, we do not. It's on the 18th of April, after which we will not have time to make internal guidelines if they make changes. This is why we hope very strongly. It would be very nice that whatever changes that you want to create at the very latest by Easter, rather before if even though the RepCo can make changes, please think of the 10th of April as the deadline. And then the last time we had the proposal for change on the last week. This time, regrettably, we don't have timetable for this. So please, well, let's go through this now on the big policies, and then after which we will be discussing the smaller issues before Easter. Comments? So comments, questions. If it's something, if there's groups that need to be taken into better account, or we need to something changed, we need to be made to approve this document. If something is unclear, please ask that now. If you have any questions on these, you may of course ask any questions.
Yes, thank you. Let's open the discussion. So the Filman. Thank you. Yes. ARA says that we cannot have actually kind of a direct queuing system, but ARA doesn't say that there shouldn't be any kind of queuing system. So if an apartment becomes free, or if a person wants to move, if a shared flat becomes free, nothing stops this person who is in the urgent position, who has to apply for shared apartments, nothing stops them from taking this shared apartment when this other person moves away. Yes, that's pretty much how it goes, but then we also have to take the notice period, etc. into account, and this is something I didn't say out loud, but let's look at this changing apartment slide. So if we have a lot of internal moving, it leads to added costs, and that's why we don't want too much of these internal moving. That's why we have put them into this non-urgent category. Because people in this very urgent category would need the apartment immediately, and they may have problems with the notice period. But yes, this internal changing of apartments are not directly within the scope of these criteria. But even though this isn't officially stated here, but if people have the same scores, if they're kind of even, then it's determined according to the time, how long they've been in the queue. Then they will kind of be put against each other in the queue. Yes, and that's why we need to change it so that people who apply from shared flats to a studio, that they would be urgent, and those who have this very urgent would receive their shared flat immediately. But still, the system is still very unfair. And we don't want people to get stuck in a shared flat if they don't want to live there, because this is what this will lead to. And so with the system that I propose, we could have a quote to the studios, and it would still be in accordance with the ARA regulations. Thank you. Saikku. Saikku Luova. Well, this was income and wealth slide, something that stuck out for me. They're talking about quite large minus scores, and I assume that they can be on the negative as well, because all the others, the positive scores are just like +1, +2, etc. Whereas for wealth, they are intense, these negative scores. So how likely do you think that people who would get any kind of negative scores, how likely is them to get any kind of apartment from AYYE? Since there is also the urgency category. So those who are in an urgent situation but have wealth or a large income, is it likely that they will not get any kind of apartment? Yes. Now currently, when we have the negative scores, if a person hasn't had any kind of urgency points, they would have had to wait longer in the queue, especially if they have applied only for the most wanted apartment types. But if we talk about apartments that are not that wanted, for example, shared apartments, then we see that it's very possible to also get the apartment even if they have the negative scores. But there must be a situation where a person has some wealth, but they are still in an urgent position. And in that case, it's really likely to get an apartment. But if a person has a lot of wealth and they're not in an urgent position, then it is quite unlikely that they will get an apartment. And something that should be taken into account is that this wealth or the income is the wealth and income that you had when you started your studies. So for example, this kind of, if you have previously worked in a summer holiday or have worked before starting your studies, that income is not calculated here. It's not taken into account. Pilman, Voltti, I forgot to mention that said that these internal moves will cause expenses to AYYE. but isn't kind of at the same magnitude the cost that we already have. So this system would not cause any kind of added cost to the present situation if we made the change to these internal movements. It doesn't kind of directly increase expenses, but we have noticed that there are significant expenses there related to, for example, a person moving to a studio, or kind of people who move within months of their previous move. And it incurs quite a lot of expenses. And is this kind of meaningful? Well, that's up for the representative council to decide. So, if we don't want to use our resources for changing a lot of apartments, if you want us to do that, if you want us to do possible, of course, we can do that. Yes, ARA guidelines give the possibility to that we can deviate from this priority order on a case-by-case basis. If, for example, we look at a situation in different buildings, what is the kind of a demand and availability there? And with this, we can also earmark and consider the tenant structure in certain buildings, because in certain buildings, there may be that there are freshmen or international students there, communal housing. We can take this kind of a tenant structure into account in each case. So it's not that straightforward as was presented here. Of course, it needs to be presented in quite a straightforward manner in this presentation. Thank you. Next speaker. In category 3, urgency, you said that a small apartment, 15 square meters, is the definition of the ARA metropolitan area. But ARA, it says that it's less than 10 square meters. So is that just a mistake in the slide? Or does the metropolitan area has kind of a different definition for some reason? I can for sure, I can remember the numbers for sure.
Okay, then it probably is 10.
There's probably 10. If it says so in the document, then it's probably a mistake in the slide. Filmon.
Yes, sitten Keski-Nisua.
Oh, okay, yes. Then Keski-Nisua next. Keski-Nisua from Voga. The scoring system and how kind of a black box it is in nature, how much like a black box is in nature. It kind of confounds us. In our internal discussion, we compared it to HOAS, where they have this kind of black box situation where you're in the queue, you don't even know what your situation is. But the situation here is that the whole representative council has received this document and knows how the scoring system will work. I think this document would be public in some way, but isn't there a risk that the communication to others, if it's not as complete as the one we have received here, then you have to put members in an unequal position if they don't have all the information. And we would be in a situation where someone who is more aware of the situation, they could kind of use some loopholes. Is there this kind of a risk here, that students are in unequal position? And what does it mean in practice if we don't have queues? Well, what that means is that people are just not put in a queue only based on how long they've been in the queue, but rather that it's based more on the need for the apartment. But the people are put in a certain order if they have similar scores. They are in that way, they are in the queue, but not queue in the way that has been before. And to answer your first question, the numbers that we have here, these are background information, the data we have here. and in the actual document are the kind of things that define the scores. These are more kind of a background information. So for example, the numbers here, they have already changed because this is for 2022. We don't have the figures yet for 2023. And also for limit values, these are not the exact figures. So these will change, these numbers, except for the fact that, or here, that you have to apply for both Otaniemi and Leppävaara. Which is why most of these are entered, submitted to the website as well. Our old model was very open, very transparent, exceptionally open, that is, and we have received praise for that. At the tenure selection for AYYE, it is very transparent and easy to understand. Whereas compared to HOAS, it's very much like a black box that you don't see kind of anything what's going on. In the future, this would be somewhere in between, that we would have a more open system than many others, because the representing council can influence this. So the model is more open than with similar operators, but still there is a lot of case-by-case basis consideration. So for example, what we have here, these will be entered into the website. The categories. So yes, as before, the situation would be similar before, that people who are more familiar with the system have an advantage. But it's the same, for example, with Kela. That those who would kind of need some kind of a support the most, they don't know how to apply for it, or they don't have the time or resources to apply. So this is a common situation. And it's something that's not easy to fix. Thank you. Councillor Vuoga. We asked that is some kind of a group missing here. I'd like to ask if it's possible to give points, for example, to people who have been active in the community. Because some associations give points to apartment quos if you have done a lot of work for the community. For example, if they've been in sections or committees for 3 years, and for that reason they haven't managed to progress that well in their studies, because they have done a lot of community things. Would this be possible? If people are otherwise in a similar position, I cannot kind of say outright if we could do this. You have, I don't know if you have an answer, but the way I see it is that this could be possible if the people are otherwise in an exactly same position. So if the other person has done more for the community, that could be the kind of a tiebreaker. But that's more of an ideological decision and not kind of based on the document. Yes, maybe it's something that we shouldn't really enter into the document. I think this is more related to this case-by-case basis. So if people are in the same category, have same points within the same category, and we cannot find that one of the candidates would be more urgent than the other, because their urgency is always kind of bypasses everything else. But if they don't have this urgency, then why? Then yes, why not? We could use this as a criteria. Because currently, for example, the board is in a different position compared to others already. But really, we cannot enter these officially into the document. This is more related to the decision according to the decision maker's discretion. Aalto for vihreämpi Aalto about the practical implementation when applying for an apartment. Would the applicant enter their own wealth and income? Can we really check it up, kind of verify it anywhere? Yes, we discussed this in the financial committee. So now, well, previously it has been just based on the applicant's own notice, which is similar to Haas. There may be some kind of a random checks made, but there is no kind of obligation to do that when it comes to student apartments. And in the committee's memo are also included the answer to this, which was that we should really consider, is it feasible or does it make sense to really verify this information, because it would take up quite a lot of resources. And we don't have the kind of immediately, we don't have the resources to verify everyone's income and wealth, because we haven't done that before. Yes, it asks the applicants to update if it changes. And if we notice that the person has different kind of income or wealth than what they have entered into the application, then we can reject or take back the offer for the apartment, or maybe even terminate their lease agreement if we see that it's very different actual information than what the person has notified. But we're going to do this on a large scale. And if the Representative Council wants us to develop it further, to verify this information more, then we would really need to decide to do that. Yes, I like to emphasize that we don't have or our apartments don't have factual income limits. It asks for the income and wealth limit so that applicants can be compared with each other. So if people are otherwise in a similar situation, the one with less income is favored. And it's always possible to people to give false information in order to gain a better position. But if we have, for example, two applicants with similar levels of income entered into the application, and we can't really see who should get the apartment first, then at that point we can compare the actual income of the applicants, if that would be the tiebreaker. In that case, we can ask the persons for an actual document about their income. And in that case, we may see that, well, you have entered false information into the application, but this is very rare, these kind of cases. I really believe that this would be a problem, and there are no factual income limits. They are just used to compare applicants with each other. Vilma? Thank you. Several points here. Can I express them all at once? Yes. So I think this monitoring of wealth, we shouldn't do it more extensively. If you, for example, have 20,000 euros in savings, you will lose a lot of points according here. I think the wealth limit should be much higher. And for example, if you have to work in order to pay the rent, and if you're talking about the ICT industry, 300 euros per month is very easy to get in that industry. But in that case, you don't have that much time to study and will not be entitled to an apartment closer by to the campus. So I think we should increase the income and wealth limits so that people wouldn't be punished for irregular work. Or if people have saved up money for years and years. I think the limits here, the figures are so low that people shouldn't be punished for them. And I don't think we should give points to people being active in the community, but if we do, of course, it should be entered here. And if it has prolonged your studies. But I don't think that people should actually be given points for being active in the community. Then there are about these tenancy times. HOAS doesn't have these, for example. Will we have this? And if we talk about urgent categories, how is this related to the tenancy time? Well, all people in these 4 categories should have their kind of a tenancy time. We will still have that as before. But this would just make it possible for people who don't have the tenancy time anymore, they could also apply. If a person doesn't have tenancy time, but if you're very urgent, will you be there at the top of the list? No. What is this based on? Because HOAS, for example, they don't have a tenancy time for shared flats. It's based on this our tenancy right time that we have. HOAS, for example, has this for 5 years for studios. And there are similar practices. Of course, AYY's tenancy time is one of the strictest there is. We also discussed this last year in the Represent Council. And reconsidering this whole system about the tenancy time, we didn't have the kind of time or resources for that. And if you want to fix it, or kind of remove it, then we have to make changes to that later on, to the right and time of residence. But a lot of things are changing here, so we have to prioritize where to use our resources. Has Ara commented on this, whether it's okay to have this right of residence and the time? Is it okay for us to have that? Ara has said that we can define it ourselves. We had this kind of a preliminary vote in the autumn, and the Represent Council stated that they don't want to change this time period for the right of residence, and so that's why it was not put into preparation. But the starting point in this discussion in the autumn was that, when also approving the guidelines, is that when you have new students and people in the start of their studies, that they are prioritized. But yes, it's okay if Ara has said that it's okay. But 2 more points. You previously said that there are a lot of costs if a person moves very often. But I think we could have that if you receive an apartment, then there would be a period of time before which you couldn't apply for a new one or get a new apartment. Could we also have kind of a division between bachelor's and master's students? Because you said that we cannot yet know that how this will affect of master students being able to apply more quickly. But could we, for example, have a prioritization for bachelor students or master students? Would that be possible? We cannot have this kind of a prioritization for all applications. But as Minna said, we have a steady building stock and students in different stages of their studies. We can take that into account when considering the needs. But we cannot kind of directly say that bachelor students would be prioritized. Well, for example, we could change these points for new students into points for bachelor students, but otherwise than that, we cannot really do that directly. But we know who are in the master's phase, who are in the bachelor's phase of their studies. So if we only have master students there, then we can use this case-by-case discretion and select more bachelor students to kind of even out the tenant structure. How could this work? Because bachelor students only very often know if they will get an apartment only in mid-July. And master students get to know already in early spring. So then when there are no bachelor's applicants, then we have to give the apartments to master students. So how can we really even it out if the situation is like this? Of course, our master students are very important as well. But we should also secure the places for bachelor students more. Like Minna was more involved in the summer apartment thing, but if we have apartments handed out only to master students, then we could, for example, offer some apartments as summer apartments and then take a step back or make changes so that the apartments would be filled in such a way that people later in their studies could also get the apartments. But if this would cause a change in the figures compared to previous years, because in previous years a lot of the apartments have become free only at the end of July, when people's right of residence have ended, because many people want to be in AYYE apartments as long as they can. So that's kind of leads to a situation where a lot of apartments become free only in July, not in spring. So not when people graduate. But maybe someone who comes straight from high school or from the army, maybe this could kind of be prioritized in some way as well. Yes, we have the points for new students, which are for both people who are starting their bachelor's or starting their master's just recently. But I don't know if we can really do it targeted towards people who are just coming from high school or military. But and also we have to treat everyone equally. So everyone who starts their studies at the same time, we cannot really kind of make a distinction like this.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. In this stage, we will close the discussion. If you have any proposals for change before 10th of April. Was it so? Yes. Then I present that the motion being that the representative council decided to record the preliminary discussion on resident selection decided. Closing item 8. At this stage I would ask the representative council, do we want to have a break or shall we take the two items on the docket? They shouldn't take a huge amount of time. So no break, we will continue. Wonderful. Moving on to item 9, the establishment of the representative council committee. In accordance with section 22 of the rules of procedure, GREPCO may establish committees by a separate decision. GREPCO must determine the task, term of office, chair and members of the committee when establishing such a committee. We'll then handle item 9.1 and
ja sen jälkeen 9.2
9.2, then 9.1, so we'll have them separate items. Moving on to item 9.1, establishment of the advocacy committee. If the representative council decided to establish an advocacy committee by choosing a chairperson and naming the established members, which is sound a bit.
Mikäli valiokuntaan ei löydy puheenjohtajaa, sitä
If there is no representative council member to act as a chairperson, it's not possible to set up a committee. At this stage, I would like to ask the RepCo, do we have a chairperson candidate? We had a preliminary discussion on the topic. AYYE 1 out of 23 meeting, the first meeting. There's also throw your friend under the bus. Always a choice topic. Pilman. I had not spoken into a microphone, so interpreters cannot hear, but...
Pollari käytettävissä.
Visa Pollari. A chairperson, but very hard to hear because no microphone with the speaker.
Kyllä tätä leikkiä vielä kestää tässä hetken aikaa pitää. Tähän on ehdottomasti pohjustuksena kanssa se, vaikka valiokunnan jäsenet ei tällä hetkellä päätä huimaa, ainakaan niin lukumäärä.
Committee members might not be very numerous in the advocacy committee.
Meillä on tulossa tuossa vaikuttamisen linjapaperi tänä vuonna keskusteluun.
We have an advocacy policy paper coming up for debate.
Todennäköisesti viemään noin koko loppuvuoden.
Probably will take the rest of the year. Be a lot
Päätöksentekoprosessin
easier for
suhteen
the decision-making process.
ensin valiokunnassa läpi,
Have these items in the committees or bringing them into the grand hall, which will mean the meetings will run long. We'll have a meeting discussion in every single meeting until the end of the year.
Mikäli ei löydy vaikuttamisen valiokuntaan,
If you not have a chairperson for this committee, then it cannot be set up. Can I get a microphone?
Saikko, ole hyvä.
That I even heard. Saikku. I state that I'm not available for chairpersonship, but if it wouldn't be that we can't get the committee, the board also can set up a work group which will work topic at hand. I see 6 individuals available for the work group, if nothing else. Is the board ready to discuss this option?
Ollikainen.
Yes. Ollikainen.
Kysymys, että miten
Question in that how work groups and committees, how are they different in role?
Ei käytännössä mitenkään.
Practically identical.
Että kuten tänään nähtiin, Takivalta tuli.
As we see today, Takiva sent a message to the RepCo list that the committee reports to the RepCo and the work group reports to the board. That's the biggest difference here. Is that a good clarification?
Tässä vaiheessa sitten päätetään, että
Here we are deciding that Pollari will... No?
Kisma, ehdotaan Lassi Malvikkoa.
Lassi Malvikko.
Yes, siinä vaiheessa annetaan pojalle yksi puheenvuoro Ollikaiselle.
I have a chair to Ollikainen.
olen käytettävissä.
I am available.
Mahtavaa, siinä vaiheessa päätetään.
Amazing, then we will decide.
Ei päätä keskustelua, vaan onko meillä vielä
Let's not end the discussion, but do we have any other member applicants for a committee?
Näitä on mahdollisuus täydentää vielä seuraavassa kokouksessa.
It is possible to fulfill these in the next meeting if you wish to do so.
Tämä me tehdään. Kyllä.
What we'll do.
Siinä vaiheessa teen vielä semmoisen esityksen.
I'll also do a proposal that
että päätöksen 6. kohdaksi
as item 6 for the decision, we will give
valiokunnalle mahdollisuus
the advocacy committee the opportunity to increase its member base. Any objections?
Ei ole.
No objections, it seems.
Yes, siinä vaiheessa päätän
Yes, then I will close the discussions and move to the side.
Esityksen mukaisesti
According to the proposal, the Representative Council decided to establish the advocacy committee, assign the committee to support the decision-making process of the student union by making statements on matters related to the theme of the committee independently at the request of the border employees. The committee carries out its duties as it sees fit and receives support, training and presentations from the AYYE board, employees, specialists or volunteers.
Asettaa valiokunnan toimikaudeksi kalenterivuoden
We'll
2023.
set the calendar year 2023 as the term of office for the committee. Will appoint a committee chair and members in accordance with Appendix 9 and oblige the committee to report its work to the Representative Council at the Representative Council meetings.
Vaikuttamisen valiokunnalla on lisäksi mahdollisuus täydentää itseään. Päätettäneen päätetty.
Decided.
Siirrytään kohta 9.1 ja siirrytään kohtaan 9.2.
Moving on to item 9.2, establishment of digital and IT committee.
Tässä on sama asia kuin aikaisemmin. Tähän etsin parhaimmillaan
Same as before, we are searching for a chairperson.
puheenjohtajaa.
If we don't have a chairperson,
perustamaan ja
we cannot set it
mikäli on
up.
muita kommentteja asiaan liittyen,
And if there are other comments on the
niin
subject,
voidaan tuoda nyt myös esille. Avaan aiheesta keskustelua.
you may bring them forth. Now, opening discussions, Fielman.
Tämä käyneen. Yes, elikkä Fielman on ehdokas puheenjohtajaksi
Fielman is
ja
the
lisätään päätökseen kohta 6, eli
chairpersons.
valiokunta voi täydentää itseään.
The committee may increase its member base. We'll add that to this one as well.
Käytössä skisman edustajaksi.
All are available for the schisma
Blin.
representation.
I would like to ask what the purpose of the committee is for 2023. The advocacy committee is quite clear, but for the digital and IT committee, it's not very well represented, and I'd perhaps like to hear a little bit more exactly what they would do during the year.
I would think that Fielman would be a good person to answer this question, as this was his aloite.
So the idea of the committee is that the services offered and AYY's IT this year it's very needed because we are cutting down on IT services, and for next year or the other years it's a different thing. But we should try this out on how this works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but we have a need for this. Malkamäki. Aalto Coalition Malkamäki, I would like to raise the point about last REPCO. Blinnika has a good point that the representation in this committee seems to be quite weak. So once I would ask, is this necessary, and does AYYE need to have a committee for everything?
muita puheenvuoropyyntöjä tai esityksestä eroavia ehdotuksia?
Do you have any other presentations or suggestions?
Ei näytä tulevan, joten siirrytään
No, so
päättämään.
let's move to decide.
Ellei Malkamäki halua tehdä esitystä, että jätetään perustelusta.
Malcolm doesn't want to lodge a
Ymmärsinkö oikein vai väärin?
state that we will not set it. So I propose that we will not set up this committee at all.
Seuraavan kerran, kun teette muutosesitykseen,
Next time you make a proposal for change, please state it clearly.
mikäli ei muita puheenvuoropyyntöjä ole enää, niin
If we don't have any other requirements or required.
Oliko meillä kannattajaa tällä asialla?
Do we have a seconder for this proposal for change? We need for this motion, so.
Anteeksi, saatatteko nimen vielä, kuka oli kannattaja?
Can you state who was seconding? Toivonen.
Next up, if we don't have any more questions for this topic, we will proceed to vote on if we are going to found the new Digital and IT Committee. Suoritetaan ensin suuntaan antava äänestys.
We'll have a preliminary vote first.
Mikäli tarve on sääntömäärä. Saadaan kohta slaidit myös.
I'll get the slides soon on the screen.
Kuten screeniltä näkyy suuntaan antavan äänestyksen
As it stated, the preliminary vote
pohjana sininen
template being blue is yes, let's found it. Red, no, let's not do this, and white is empty.
Laput ylös nyt.
Packets up now.
Punainen voittaa.
Yes, red prevails. 14-9.
Päätöksenä siis on esityksen vastaisesti, että en perusta
So,
Digi- ja IT-valiokuntaa.
contrary to the preliminary decision, we will not found the IT and Digital Committee.
Tämä on päätettäneen ja
Has been decided.
Suljetaan kohta 9 ja siirrytään
Closing item 9, moving to item 10.
yhteisövaliokunnan sekä talous- ja kiinteistövaliokunnan.
Filling vacancies on the Community Committee and the Finance and Real Estate Committee. At its meeting 1/2023, the RepCo decided to establish the Community Committee and the Finance and Real Estate Committee. However, the seats of all the representing council groups were not filled by the deadline, and thus the representing council must decide on the filling of vacancies.
Edustajista ryhmillä on ollut mahdollisuus täydentää valiokuntapaikkoja aikavälillä 13.3.
And the groups have had the chance to
Täytetyt paikat
fill in the vacancies until today. And the filled vacancies are shown in Appendix 10.
Joka toimitaan ihan hetken päästä screenille.
And we'll put it up on the screen very soon.
Yes. Eli yhteisövaliokunnan osalta.
So for the community committee, Rengas will fill in the vacancy by Mikael Blinnikka, Vihreämpi Aalto, Lassi Möylsä and Henne Mikkonen will fill the vacancies. How about Skisma? Do you have someone to fill in your vacancy? Apparently not. So let's move on to the Financial and Real Estate Committee. Kylterirengas, Iino Koponen, Vihreämpi Aalto, Antti Regelin and Jonna Mikkola. Here we can also state that if Skisma wants to fill in their vacancy for the deputy member at some point, we will give them the chance, or to give the committee the chance to kind of a supplement itself, if this is supported by the members. Yes, then I think we can close discussion and move on to the decision, which is that the Representative Council decided to fill vacancies on the Community Committee and the Financial Real Estate Committee in accordance with Appendix 10. In addition, it gives the Community Committee the possibility to fill in deputy vacancies if needed. Closing item 10, moving to item 11, other business. Close and opening discussion. Is there any other business? Pollari. Pollari from Skisma. Hopefully, now that we have the advisory committee, one good thing that they could do is to look into AYY's advocacy goals and how they are fulfilled. Because I'd like to remind you that AYY is not a regular association or community, but an entity, a public entity, which is also subject to the Equality Act. Thank you. There are no other requests for floor, so I'll close discussion. Closing item 11, moving to item 12, closing of the meeting. It's 6:49 p.m. Closing the meeting. Thank you.
Vittu, mulla tuli ihan kauan.